Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you're having a great start to your week. And just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lee Leppert. I'm the Senior Creative Manager here at the Cromeans Law Firm. And today we have Casey Niederhofer. She is the Lead Associate Attorney. There she is joining us now. She will be presenting today, and once the presentation is over, we will have a Q&A for anyone to ask any and all questions that you may have for her. During the current pandemic, made a lot of things uncertain, particularly with construction projects. No matter what side of the project that you are on, you definitely need to get paid. And if you're in charge of funds, you need to be aware of your liability and the consequences if you misapply construction trust funds. So today we hope you enjoy the presentation Casey has put together for you and learn how to best protect yourself on the front end. So Casey, without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you for coming. I know that with everything going on this week, it's a little hectic. So I appreciate y'all being here for this presentation. So we're gonna go over trust funds, like Lee said, and let's just jump on in. All right, so in the definition of construction trust funds, it's from the statute itself. So construction trust funds are any payments made to a contractor, a subcontractor, officer, agent of a contractor that's under a construction contract for the improvement of a piece of property. So essentially, any construction contract is going to have construction trust funds involved. Additionally, loan receipts can also be trust funds if they're borrowed by a contractor or an owner for improving their property. So if someone takes out a loan to put on some more stuff to their house, that's going to be construction trust funds as well. So the act was created to protect anyone working on a project. So it's created to protect contractors, subcontractors, and material suppliers. So when an owner or contractor doesn't pay and the work has been completed and accepted, then the person who got the construction trust funds is going to be liable. So for example, if you were hired by a general contractor to perform electrical work and that work was done timely and it was free of defects, but you were never paid, you are protected by this statute. So the general contractor cannot hold those funds from you, nor can the general contractor pay a different amount or pay a different job with those funds. Many times you hear the phrase rob Peter to pay Paul, and unfortunately sometimes general contractors do take money from one project and use it to pay another because they're behind or they haven't been paid on the other project. However, that is a violation of the statute. So if a general contractor receives funds from the current project but uses that money to pay a previous project, that's misapplying construction trust funds because each job's payments are meant for that specific job. So if you have completed a pay application and the owner has accepted your work and it's free from defects, and the contractor has been paid for it, your amount has been paid to the contractor and it's the money from the contractor is meant for you. So it's misapplying your funds if they've paid for a different job with that money. A general contractor can hold funds if they're unsure, or I'm sorry, they may withhold funds, not that they can. A general contractor may hold funds if they're unsure about when their next job will be. Like in this current situation, we have seen some general contractors withholding payments on projects because they're not sure when their next job is going to be or how they're going to pay their employees, but that money is due to the subcontractors and material suppliers that have completed their work on a project. Unless your contract says otherwise, that's not your problem. At the end of the day, that's the general contractor's issue and not yours because you have completed your work and you are entitled to be paid for it. There are defenses to this, but we are headed that way. So the general defenses a general contractor may use is that the work was bad. That is something that they can claim. Whether or not that's true, that's something that we can discuss in litigation, or if you want an attorney involved before litigation in some kind of negotiations prior to the general contractor may try to withhold your funds due to what they're calling poor performance. They may also say that the funds were used to cover their costs for the project. So overhead, paying their employees, those kinds of payments within the project itself to their company does count as a defense to misapplication. So they're not easily proven. Like I said earlier, with poor performance, they have to actually prove that the performance was bad to withhold your money. So there is still a chance for you to get paid if the general contractor is withholding for what they're calling poor performance. That is a tongue twister. Beneficiaries for construction trust funds is pretty much anyone working on a project. It can be artisans, laborers, mechanics, contractors, subcontractors, material men, and property owners under a residential contract are also beneficiaries because it's their property that is being benefited from the contract. The Construction Trust Fund Act does not apply to a bank or other lenders, a title company or a closing agent, or a corporate surety who issues a payment bond covering the contract for the construction. Those people are not allowed to assert the misapplication of trust funds. The trustees is defined as a contractor, subcontractor, or owner who receives the funds. So if you have been paid on a job, you are now a trustee because you have received money that is designated for that project. So there are two types of claims that a subcontractor can have against a contractor who has failed to pay them. You can have claims against the contractor in civil and criminal court. Typically for civil claims, you're going to recover the funds that are owed to you that were withheld, but there is no recovery for attorney's fees under this statute. We do try to recover attorney's fees under different statutes and assert different claims so that we can try to get our clients' attorney's fees back. In order to pursue criminal claims, you have to seek out the district attorney for their help. Some specific concerns for residential projects in the construction statute, there's a whole section just for residential. So there's some extra things that you have to be careful about and additional rules that you have to comply with because homesteads are usually involved for the owner. If there's a written contract with the homeowner and it's more than $5,000, you must deposit the funds into a construction account with a bank, and the account must be a construction account, and you must be able to provide certain kind of information. That information is going to be the source and the amount of the funds in the account and the date they were deposited, the date and amount each disbursement from the account, and the person whom the funds were dispersed, and the current balance of the account. Usually all of these kinds of information are available just when you log on to your bank anyway, but making sure that you have a specific account for residential projects, especially if you're a contractor who does both commercial and residential. All right, so how is misapplication defined? So misapplication is defined as a trustee, the person who receives the funds, intentionally or knowingly or with the intent to defraud, directly or indirectly retains, uses, disperses, or otherwise diverts trust funds without first fully paying all current or past due obligations incurred to the beneficiaries of the trust. So in regular English, that just means a trustee who has received funds with the intent to defraud someone has not paid them, even though the money is due. So that's what that means. Additionally, the owner of a company can be personally liable for misapplication of trust funds. In order to be held individually liable, you have to show that the officer directly or indirectly retained, used, distributed, or otherwise diverted the funds. So you have to be able to show that that person individually took the money, not necessarily to their individual account, but they somehow used the money for something else. So if you are in a company and you are the person who controls the money, then be careful and just make sure that you know exactly where the money is going, because you can be pulled into a lawsuit individually and not charged, but held to account for the money, and there could have a negative impact on your credit. And if you have any non-exempt personal assets, those could be vulnerable. You should always pay your subs and suppliers for good and timely work if you've been paid by the general contractor, depending on what your individual contract says. Not paying them can result in them accusing you of misapplying trust funds, even if you haven't. So you must use the funds received from a project for that project, as long as you still owe debts to that project. So the criminal charges for misapplication of construction trust funds, there are certain penalties that you can face. You can face a fee of up to over $500 in violation of this, up to $4,000, and a year in jail. So it really is a big deal, but that is a criminal charge. Additionally, if you are found to have the intent to defraud, you could have a fine up to $10,000 and jail with no less than 2 years and no more than 10. So it's a bigger deal to be found to have the intent to defraud. Lastly, a trustee who fails to establish and maintain a construction account and maintain an account for the record of the construction funds is a fine up to $4,000 and 1 year in jail. So there are a lot of ways that the criminal charge could affect your life if you are found to have misapplied trust funds on a criminal level. In addition to possible criminal charges, Texas courts allow subcontractors to maintain causes of action in civil cases, like I said earlier. The construction trust fund statutes are difficult to navigate on your own because they are very legalese and the language is hard to understand sometimes. And the other statutes in the property code work with the misapplication of trust fund statute in order to get you everything that you're owed. So as I kind of discussed earlier, there are some defenses when you're being accused of misapplication of trust funds. There are three main ones. If you have used the funds to pay for actual expenses related to the property. So like I said earlier, your overhead, your cost to your employees, stuff like that, that's going to be a defense. Secondly, if you have a reasonable belief that the beneficiary is not entitled to the funds, then you can retain those funds. And again, it's just if you have said that it's poor performance or there's a defect in the work. And lastly, if you've paid all the funds to the beneficiary no later than 30 days after a written notice, then you can also use that as a defense. So if someone accuses you of criminally misapplying trust funds and you pay that person what they're owed within 30 days, that is a defense to the criminal charges. If you find yourself dealing with misapplication as a contractor or as someone who believes that the contractor you've worked with has misapplied funds, then contact us here. We can help you. I myself have several lawsuits where we are claiming misapplication of trust funds or defending it. We can walk you through those statutes and get you payment for the work that you've done.
Thank you so much, Casey. Appreciate you. So we're actually going to open up now for our Q&A portion of the presentation. So this is your opportunity to ask Casey any and all questions you may have. Feel free to send a message in the chat or to unmute yourself. But this is definitely an opportunity to chat with our lead associate attorney.
Hey Casey, my name is Shibu with the Construction Corporation. A few quick questions. I think I missed the first part on how the trust fund is created or with which money it is created. Because if we're working with some folks that are building some multifamily and it's not going well, so They took the initial loan from from the bank, but then we were investors in it, and then they ran short of funds, so they're getting another infusion from from another third-party investor. So, but and they were promissory notes given to this contractor, but then he took it for one project but applied it to other projects. So it's not really just about trust funds, but I mean, what can you classify as a trust fund? So will any of these monies given to the contractor can that be classified, or this new money that's coming in from this third party investor, can that be classified as a trust fund? So going forward, at least we know that this contractor is not going to be misappropriating funds or moving things around and stuff like that.
Sure. So I just have a couple questions just for clarification on my end. So you're an investor in a business rather than a contractor working underneath someone on a house.
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's multifamily. I mean, I'm a contractor, but I mean, I typically do stuff like this, but this is on a much larger scale. It's something that we can't handle, so we just ended up investing in it.
Okay, so you didn't do any work on the projects themselves?
No.
Okay, so that's not going to be misapplication of trust funds because you are not one of the people that's working on the project or technically a beneficiary of the loan proceeds from yourself. So there are other causes of action that you could claim, like breach of contract, especially like you said, if there's a promissory note or something like that. But the misapplication of trust funds is really to protect subcontractors, material suppliers, people working on the project, or the person who owns the residential home itself.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for Casey? I do have a question, Casey. I know we sometimes get questions constantly here at the office, but what would I do? Let's say I think that if I was a sub and I was on a project and the contractor I thought misapplied, and I dealt with him maybe 6 months ago, and I never got paid and I no longer work for him, are there timelines or deadlines when I can still go after him per se, who I believe misapplied?
Sure, yeah. So if you haven't been paid on a project and you're asserting, let's say, a breach of contract claim, that's, I believe, 4 years you have until you can't assert that claim anymore. And specifically for misapplication of trust funds, the statute itself doesn't have a timeline or a statute of limitations, but something in the property code or like the other causes of action you're asserting will have statutes of limitations. So that will limit the timeline where you can sue.
Okay, thank you. Please feel free, you can unmute yourself or also send us a message in the chat, any questions you may have. While we're waiting on that, let's say I was working on a job site, for example. I see a GC pull up in a brand new car, and once the project is complete, I still haven't been paid. What are the next steps, I guess, that I can take to protect myself and ensure that I get paid for the project?
Sure. So something to think about while you're on the project still is filing a lien. So if you have been on the project, there are specific timelines to file a lien. And that just means, let's say you're owed $15,000. We file a lien on the property that says you're owed $15,000, and the owner of the property is now liable to pay you, even if they've already paid the general contractor. However, if you've missed those timelines because they've been promising payment, we hear that all the time, then the next step would be talking to an attorney like myself for filing what's called a breach of contract action. And we would always, if something like that happens where you've got a new truck on the site or you see that someone's taken a bunch of trips to the Bahamas or whatever, then we would, also claim misapplication of trust funds. And like on a file I was on earlier this year, we did claim misapplication of trust funds, and we did eventually get their bank records and their credit card statements and all of those things to find out that they were in fact misapplying trust funds and going to Rockets games and buying cars. And so there's always a way to find out what someone's doing, but a lot of times you do need a lawsuit to get those kinds of documents.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And I guess on the opposite, or I guess if I'm waiting to pay my subs, if I was on the opposite and until the next job pays out, what could the ramifications be for me, and what steps could I take to protect myself from mishap or from any allegations?
Yeah, definitely. So we do have some clients that we, represent as general contractors, and that has been a really big question right now, especially with everything with coronavirus and now a hurricane. People are wondering, how do I pay out this money? What do I do? And it really depends on your contract. So at the end of the day, what you've agreed to as a payment clause, if you've agreed to a pay when paid or pay if paid, that's going to make a difference. But if you have the money from the general contractor, you have to pay out. If you have the money from the owner and they've approved all the work, you have to pay out. You don't want to get charged with misapplication of trust funds. You don't want to get involved in a lawsuit. It's time consuming and expensive. Just to defend yourself if you can just pay out and avoid that situation altogether.
Okay, thank you. Could you go into the pay when paid and paid if paid clauses?
Sure. So I know we have more in detailed information about this on our website, on the blogs, and I think another webinar about this, but a pay when paid would be when a general contractor is paid by an owner, you have to pay within a certain amount of time. So the property code dictates, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but the property code does limit the amount of time you can wait outside of a contract. So if your contract says, I will be paid within 7 days of the GC being paid by the owner, that's a pay when paid. So that is a lot more grounded. It's a lot more concrete. You know when you're going to get paid because there's a deadline. However, pay if paid, you are taking the burden as a subcontractor or a material supplier that if the GC doesn't get paid, you can't get paid. And while you can always file a lien, you can always file a lawsuit, that costs money. And so we always try to stay away from pay if paid. And additionally, in your contract, there has to be additional language. It's statutory and it's outlined. It's like half a page usually about how you're giving up your rights and you have to sign away some stuff. So be on the lookout if there is a section that quotes the Business and Commerce Code. That's a red flag for you to say, wait a second, what am I agreeing to? And we can always review those kinds of contracts for you. I know that's a big part of my job at the Cronin's law firm. I review contracts for a lot of subcontractors, and I know that we have some flat fee agreements. If you're not ready to have an attorney on a general retainer, we can just do a quick turnaround. My turnaround time on contract reviews usually around 48 hours. So I try to get that back to our clients as quickly as I can, because I know a lot of times those are on a quick turnaround and you guys have to have answers right away. So that is something that we offer here.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for going into all of that.
Hi, it's Subbu again. I have a few other questions. Again, we are a general contractor, so we employ a lot of subcontractors. And the typical contract that we have with our owners, especially for the larger projects, are all AIA contracts. Those are standard, and they're all stipulated sum contracts. But for the general, for the subcontractors, we just have a small 1-page or 2-page, contract.
Yeah.
Very kind of basic. That's maybe something that we may need to have somebody review. But typically, for all the small subcontractors, we don't wait for the owner to pay us before we pay them. We just end up paying. But sometimes, if it's a large sum, and and for the larger subcontractors, even though we typically pay in 30 days, sometimes it gets pushed out. So going back to you pay when paid. Is that a standard that's taken for granted, or is that or does that need to be included in our contract with the subcontractors?
I would always include what you want in your contract in the actual contract. Industry standard can be so many things, and you don't want to get caught in a situation where you may have had a conversation with someone or an email with someone that says one thing, but your contract says another, but then someone else says something else, and that kind of turns into a lot of confusion. And so it's best just to have all of your standard terms and conditions listed out in the contract. And something I've also done for clients is we have just a standard contract that you guys can manipulate and can say, okay, well, this time I want this payment clause, this time I want this termination clause, and we can do something a little more fluid for you. That way, for certain projects, like you're saying, if you don't want to wait to pay them, you just want to do it and get it over with, then that's fine. And if your contract has a specific payment clause, you also need in there that any diversion from a certain clause on your end doesn't invalidate any other clause in the contract. So if you do have a specific payment term and you don't follow it for the length of the contract, your sub or your material supplier is going to have an expectation, but because you've changed what your contract says by your actions, then you're kind of in a pickle. So you don't want you want all your language in your contract to protect you. And, that's why we do what we do in the contract review. And I think that a lot of people would benefit from that, just from understanding that if you do change something in the middle of the job, you may be waiving some of your contractual rights, and you don't want to do that either.
Yeah, so we have a really good contract with the AIA, with the owners, but we have something very generic, a really small thing with the subcontractors, and then usually it works, but there are some occasions where it doesn't. Now, just recently we had one where the subcontractor did not perform, and then he caused us a lot of pain, and then we had to hire somebody else, and bad workmanship. So we had somebody else come back and fix things that that were the after effect of their workmanship, and then we had somebody else come back to finish up the scope of work. So we really don't have any termination clause or penalty clause and stuff like that. So
yeah, those would all be helpful for you in those kinds of situations. And even if you never need it until you need it. And unfortunately, a lot of people go 20, 30 years, just a one-page contract, and then they've got a big job that's worth $350,000, $1 million, and that's the one where something goes wrong. And that's when you really need that kind of protection, but you haven't had it because you didn't need
it. Yeah, makes sense.
Casey, this is Eric. Do you guys help draft the contracts as well if we need help in that regard, or is it that we send a contract to you guys to look over?
Sure, I do both. I've drafted contracts from scratch. I've drafted all layers of contracts. So I've drafted GC contracts, subcontractors, owners, material suppliers. I've kind of done it all. So we have kind of a basic rundown, if you don't have one already, of stuff that we think is really beneficial. And then if we go through it with you and you say, well, this is something I'm really concerned about because this is a problem I've had, then we add that in. And so if you don't have a contract, we can definitely create one from scratch. But we do also, like for the situations, if you have a GC that is asking you to come onto a project, you're not sure if it's a good contract, that's what we have the contract review for. So we can explain the situation, tell you what to watch out for. But if you are someone who needs just a contract that you need to give out to someone else, then we do draft those from scratch or work with what you already have.
Okay, are they based on different skill sets in terms of, let's say you have one for framers, roofers, can we create for each individual specific skill set, or is it just generic that fits all modes of construction?
That could be up to you. I don't think you need a specific one for every kind of job you may have. I think usually a contract is pretty expansive and would be protective of you in all those scenarios. If there is something specific you're worried about, with a roofer or with a concrete pourer, and you want something more specific language, then we can always attach their scope of work or their bid or something like that to the contract to make sure that that's part of it, and they know that what you're expecting of them is very specific and what you're going to be paying them.
Okay. It's only, you guys specialize only in construction contracts, or do you guys specialize also in MOUs between nonprofit organizations and our firm, and also in other sectors of the business in terms of supply chain, etc. contracts for that as well?
Yeah, so I do a lot of the business formation side of the firm too. So I am very familiar with the actual organization of all the businesses and how they interact. And I've created contracts for, business partners, construction contracts. We kind of do a bunch of different things with contracts because they're just so important. And having the correct contract is so important to your business to make sure that it's working correctly. We do kind of everything.
Thank you. Good to know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Do you have any other questions for Casey?
Yeah, the contact information in the email that they sent, is that directly to you, or it's the one on Katy Freeway? That's directly to you, correct?
Yes, that's the office I work in, yes.
Okay. So you're not in San Antonio, you're here in Houston?
I'm in Houston, yes, sir.
Okay.
We do have a San Antonio office and just launched our Austin location as well, so to better serve Texas. But I'll follow up with an email. I'm going to send a presentation to you all, and then this was recorded, so I'm going to post it as well for those who came in a little late or those who missed. I know with the hurricane, there's definitely been a little change in this week. So, but any questions that you have for Casey, I'm going to have her contact information there. So please feel free to email her, call her here at the office, and with all your needs. But thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate everyone's time, and we hope that you stay safe and have a great rest of your week.
Okay, one more question. With the virus, are you guys also seeing people in person with appointments? Is that what you're saying?
I think
I don't know
are.
her name. It says TCLF IMAC, I think. But,
her name's Lee.
Lee, okay. Yeah, I didn't catch her name. So okay. Okay, yeah, you guys seeing people with appointments also, as long as we have our masks on?
I have to clarify that with our office manager. I know previously we were not allowing clients or potential clients in the office, but I'm not sure what the regulation is right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can definitely clarify that for you, Eric. And I know right now with Zoom and GoToMeeting, we have all these other webinar type or just virtual meetings, but we can definitely get that answered for you. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes I like face-to-face. We did some stuff for FEMA last year, and you touched on one of those where the GC didn't pay us, and we did good work, so I lost very good framers because of that. And then and we lost a lot of money due to the issue. And we took people down to, it was the Hurricane Harvey FEMA home construction all up and down the coast, Corpus Christi, etc. So this would have been some good information to know back then. But I guess this year we wanted to do it right, and then the virus happened. God. So no, thank you, ladies. I want to save your information so that I can get with you on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.
Have a great